Tom Bluewolf is founder and director of Earth Keepers and Company, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating people of all ages on the importance of relationship with the earth and each other. He is a charter member of the World Council of Elders, the Indigenous Healers Association, and travels the world teaching workshops, conducting ceremonies, and inspiring hearts with the message of peace and harmony with all our relations. He is a board member of several local, regional, and national environmental organizations and active in many roles with youth programs around the country. He has appeared on many radio and television programs, written hundreds of articles to present the views of the Earth Keepers organization, and has received numerous awards and acknowledgments for his work with Earth Keepers over the past 34 years. Tom is a Native American spiritual guide, tribal ambassador, peacemaker, and faith keeper. He is a musician, artist, herbalist, naturopath, environmentalist, author, and lecturer. Tom was born in southern Alabama, raised and taught in the traditional ways by his Creek grandparents. Tom has tribal affiliation with the Eufaula Band, Star Clan of the eastern lower Muskogee Creek Nation. He composed and co-wrote the album Sacred Ground with Danny Begay as Spirit Keepers on the Intuitive Sound music label in 1999, which can be found on the intuitivesound.com website and the Intuitive Sound YouTube channel. Well, welcome to the Nexus, Tom Bluewolf, my old friend. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I am above average, but I'm getting better. There's
Good to see you.
good to see you too. We've just for full disclosure, I think we've known each other for about 3 decades now.
At least, maybe counting.
And counting. But, you know, when you get to the seasoned state that we are in, you know, you kind of, counting isn't as important as it used to be.
No.
But it is relevant to, you know, to a track record, to you know, there's a bunch of experiences that we have over the course of space and time. And those experiences add to our perspective and the way that we look at the world around us. And today, having this conversation with you about Indigenous teachings and wisdom and how that applies to what we're seeing in this, what I consider a transformative disruption in humanity, and how those teachings and the wisdom of the Indigenous ancient peoples really can provide some guidance and some clarity to this chaotic time.
I'd like to think so.
You would hope so, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure you have as well, is as we have more experience in time, our perspectives are impacted and influenced by that. And we look at the things that we have experienced, and then we see the new things that we're experiencing, and you go, well, what kind of a filter am I going to use to process this new data set, this new stream of information, the tsunami of shit and the deluge of data? And I know that in the many ceremonies and lodges that I've been blessed to share with you, there's always been a transformative enlightenment and kind of a cleansing in those experiences. How do you see what's going on today, and how can the Indigenous teachings and wisdom help us navigate through this crazy time that we're in?
That's a good question. You know, that first thing we have to do is get people's attention. You know, people seem to be stressed beyond the limits. And one of the worst crimes, I believe it to be a crime, ever perpetrated upon humanity was the idea that somehow we're separate. You know, once upon a time, we used to think that if the cells in the body start attacking each other, there's an issue with our immune system. We call that an autoimmune deficiency. And we give them names, you know, like HIV and rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and such as this. Well, in the beginning, it was told to us that humans were the immune system of the mother. We had the power to give her a good day or a bad day. Not unlike other animals who always just give her a good day because they're all on a mission. It's the humans that think they can make decisions to do what's right or to not do what's right. And they call that free will. But what happens is when they decide they want to start killing each other, like cells in the body, mother suffers now from an autoimmune deficiency. And these symptoms that people are calling climate change are basically symptoms of an autoimmune deficiency. She's dehydrated. They call that a drought. She's got chills and fever. She's got convulsions and seizures. She's hooked up to IVs all over the world, thousands and thousands of companies and organizations pulling fluids from her body. She's surrounded by enough satellites that from Andromeda, it looks like the Earth is in a dialysis machine. Everybody knows, when you stub your toe, your whole body is evolved. Well, the Earth is now the stubbed toe of the solar system. Everybody knows that she's in trouble right now. And it's because of human behavior, basically human behavior. People want to deny that, but that's what it is. And the behavior we have decided by watching and listening is a result of the conversation. So our people say the world is perfect. There's just a lot of people having a really bad conversation. So if we could somehow build the agreement that everyone would raise the level of their personal poetry, so the things we said to each other were actually a reflection of what we hold dear in our hearts about what it means to be human, walking together on the earth right now. People are beginning to remember, but not fast enough, that we here who are walking on the earth are in fact testimonials to a successful lineage of humans who somehow avoided the genocide that's been going on this planet for thousands of years. Our ancestors avoided that because here we are, walking on the planet. Millions didn't make it, but we did. So our people believe that we were somehow chosen because we had what it took somewhere in our essence to actually make a positive difference in the transformation of life on Earth as we progress in the universe. People forget we're rotating 1,200 miles an hour. We're following a dwarf star through space at 66,000 miles an hour, and no one has a clue where we're going. We think that's enough motivation to sing and dance and enjoy the ride. Pick the low-hanging fruit. Fall in love right now. It's not going to last long. I did an experiment on myself recently. I asked some of these astrophysicists and robotic engineers, I said, here on Earth, everything is slowed way down, all the frequencies, all the energy, all the vibrations, so that things appear to be solid. The third dimension has a definite effect on us, because of these energies. And so my life spreads out. If I live to be 100, that's a long time on Earth. So I asked my friends, I said, I wonder what I would look like if I wasn't on this ball, if I was in space. What would my life look like? They said, well, you have to use that equation, E equals MC squared. I said, really? They said, yeah, that's how we got to the moon. I said, okay, I'll do it. So my mass was 170 pounds. So I multiplied my mass times the speed of light, and then I squared it. So in space, I would be 1.57 quintillion units of radiation. That's 19 zeros. That's a lot of energy. And I said, well, what would that look like? They said, blink. And I did, and they said, that's it. If you blink, you miss it. You go by that fast. So the result of that experiment I did on my spirit was to realize how fleeting this all is, and the illusion of ideologies that become delusional inside this bubble that we're put in has caused us severe crisis right now. And if we want to make a difference and alter the steering, we feel the first thing we need to do is pay attention to our language. Language is the fabric of the culture. You want to change something, you speak. They call it, it's kind of like casting a spell, spelling and all that. So if we say, I'm about to say something, I want it to be true, I want it to be necessary, but most of all, I want it to be kind. If we're kind to each other, it makes a big difference. We reduce all of these sophisticated and complicated issues. People say, well, what about this? And what about that? And all these ideologies, right? Mm-hmm. And I say, well, what if you just forget about all the ideologies and realize that we owe our entire existence to 12 inches of topsoil, the fact that it rains? Once we realize that, you think, well, who are you here with? 700 and some odd billion people who all came through a mother. We have that in common. We also have it in common that we're all going to die. You would think that we all have a mother and we're all going to die would be enough motivation to have us all get along and enjoy the ride, because we're all headed to the same place. Like Ram Dass says, we're all just kind of walking each other home. The conversations that we have between birth and death are hideous right now, speaking of the current conversation. So one of the things that I feel is greatly needed is diligent attempts to alter the global narrative. And so it all begins right here, right now. I mean, you can't wait for Calvary to come. There is no Calvary. We have to make the difference in our everyday conversation, because it is all energetics and it is all connected. I think quantum physics calls it the entanglement theory. What happens on one side of the universe is felt on the other. The whole place is connected. Once we actually remember that, then we can make a difference. And so then we start speaking kindly to each other. We start being respectful and bringing dignity to the situation. We start caring about the children. We start caring about the water. We start caring about the topsoil. All the things that really matter about keeping this sweet dream of life on Earth alive. What we're doing now, we can see the end of the trail. I mean, there's more plastic in the Pacific Ocean right now than there is fish. So, I mean, we have to alter the course. And it begins you got to track it. But believe me when I tell you, it begins with the next thing we say. How we speak to each other makes a huge difference. So much so that when I take these trips to Europe and Africa and South American places, this is what comes up. I was in Africa not long ago in Kenya, and I was talking to the Maasai people. Okay, living in the bush, right, in Kenya. Big old fella. Beautiful regalia. And they love red. So everything is shades of red, And he grabs my arm, and that's the way they greet you. I didn't know that at the time. I was a little bit intimidated. He grabbed my arm and he said something in Maasai language. It sounded kind of like he was just clearing his throat. And I asked my interpreter, and I said, what did he say? My interpreter said, he asked you how the children are. I said, he asked me how the children are? He goes, yeah. And I was so touched. I had never, upon meeting somebody, that's never been the first question. How are the children? And then my interpreter told me, he also said that whatever I said in response to that question would tell him everything he needed to know about me and the culture that I come from. And so I'm thinking, this is what we need. This is the kind of empathy and the kind of compassion that's missing in the conversations here today. How are the children? Children of the future. Water is life. The earth gives us food. Even in our language, the word for plants is basically translated into English as those who care for us. The plant people are those who care for us. So they are our relatives, our keepers. And they teach us about forgiveness, because no matter what we do to them, they keep coming back.
Yes.
That's a beautiful forgiveness. And so this is what I believe. I believe that if we really want to make a positive change in anything we're doing, it begins with how we speak to one another. We have to have respect and dignity. We have to have love and forgiveness and compassion and empathy and reverence and all of these wonderful qualities. And those qualities have to be inherent in every conversation that we have, now more than ever, because right now, linguistics is like a medic in a battlefield.
I have to not only echo that, but it doesn't surprise me with the synchronicities of what you're talking about and the path that I've been on over the last several years. I've been developing this, what I call is my philosophy of reality, and what I call it, the name of it is Informatica. And Informatica is just the simple things of the nut of the nugget, or what people refer to as first principles thinking, right? And you have to get to the essence of whatever it is, sans all of the wrapping and the packaging that people have been putting around the language. And one of the core components of Informatica is that language is the operating system of your mind. The words, the letters, the sounds, the symbols, all have certain meaning, and they have, and when they're put together, they become these ideologies that you're talking about. And to the point you were making about how polluted, essentially, our conversation is, and it needs to be improved. There's been a deliberate effort and intent, from my perspective, to mangle and manipulate the language, the linguistics, the meanings. We have all of this confused chaos of crap in the conversations about our identities and our genders and our purpose and our place in reality and in the societies that we inhabit and that we navigate. And I think one of the most important things, again, that you just talked about is the purity of the conversation, of the language in the conversation, where it's coming from, the individual, the integrity and the dignity and the authenticity of the individual, and the words that they use to not only describe themselves, but the relationship that they're having with not only other people, but with the universe, with the cosmos, with the Mother Earth. The whole idea that plants and animals and everything is actually alive was something that indigenous and ancient cultures throughout millennia, through all of the cosmologies of cultures that we've been able to unearth and decode and decipher and try to gain meaning from, they all have a common theme and characteristic in their cosmologies, that somebody from up there came down here, told us something, taught us something, showed us something, maybe even had something to do with our development. But all of the cultures looked at reality as everything was alive. Right. It's not only us and the animals and the plants and Gaia and the solar system, the sun, the galaxy and the universe are all living beings. And I think that the purity of understanding the reality of that is where the true essence of the conversation that you're talking about will come from once people get rid of all the crap and they get to really what it is that how do you feel about the nature of consciousness and reality that you inhabit? Do you have an understanding? Do you have a respect? Do you have a way in which you are communicating with it that enables you to be as pure and as flowing in the flow and in the Taoist perspective, right? I've told my daughters, if you don't go with the flow will make you go. And you will find yourself either having a good trip down the river of life, or you're going to be beached and maybe not even have a boat to float in, right?
Or like some people hang on to the bank.
There's a lot of that going on right now, don't you think?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hanging on to the bank. Waiting for a windfall.
They're waiting for somebody to either throw them a rope, throw them a buoy, throw them a paddle, throw them a boat, throw them something, but they're not moving because they're stuck on the bank.
Well, we say that in your mind, speaking about the mind, our elders always told us that the coyote lives in the mind. And the coyote knows your language. It knows your favorite words, knows the stories you like to hear, and tells them to you over and over. And you get used to it. It's a comfort zone. The eagle lives in your heart, always tells the truth. Might not be what you want to hear, might use words you're not used to, might say things that make you feel uncomfortable, but it's the truth. So the eagle and the coyote are going at it all the time. Coyote usually wins out because it's so familiar and it says what you want to hear. So somehow or another, we have to allow the coyote to exist, but just use it as entertainment value and amusement. Don't let it make decisions. And so value-based decision-making skills need to come from the heart, not the mind. The mind is a trickster. So that's how we feel about that. And it's interesting, because one of the things that I thought was interesting is like on this next trip to Germany, they've asked me to recite native indigenous perspectives on ethics, morals, and value-based decision-making skills. And so when I speak them into this machine they've set up, this computer, it automatically translates them into a software program that installs them in robots. And I was very, weirded out
I think
by
so.
this. And I'm saying, because in my mind, because I'm so limited, I wasn't really thinking about artificial intelligence as though it were a humanoid, and that they needed to be programmed. But then I started thinking about it. And it is kind of like what we've become. And so I said, well, first we need to install these ethics and morals into humans. The robots, we can take care of them later. I said, it's humans who have forgotten what that means. And it boggles the mind when you see some of the lack of ethics and morals in humanity. When people become angry or fear-based or greedy, or, one-sided, all of these things that are just the opposite of compassion and empathy and respect and dignity against people that are in your own species, your own family. Once upon a time, for instance, uh, all the races had a mission. You know, the red people were in charge of the fire, and the white people were in charge of the air, and the black people were in charge of the earth, and the yellow people were in charge of everything else. And we all sat at the table, and everybody respected each other. We were on a mission, not unlike everybody else on the planet. And our main goal was to keep the dream alive. You know, make people happy. One of the events that really shaped some of the morals in me, some of the transforms, and I'm still, you know, digesting this. I was in a village in Africa once where, you know, they don't have any police or no jails or anything like that. Everybody just kind of like does what they're supposed to do. Nobody commits a crime. There's not even a word for it, you know. But having said that, this one old fella knocked another fella over, and when he did, he hit his head and it killed him. And so I wondered what they were going to do about that, because people were, you know, people took sides immediately. You know, one guy gets the other guy. One guy's dead, he's a victim. The other guy killed him. Was it an accident? I mean, it went on and on and on. It didn't last a long time, but it was deep. So they took the guy and they tied him to a chair and set him in the middle of the village, blindfolded him. And the whole village came out and sang his birth song to him. And then they told him stories about his family. Because, I mean, this village had been there for 10,000 years. They knew, everybody knew everybody. I knew your grandfather. I knew your great-grandfather, you know. So they're telling him all these stories. Within no time, he's crying like a baby, you know, you know, he was just so remiss, you know. So towards the end of it, there was a lady in another one of these little crawls, like the little huts they lived in, who was just about to give birth. So they took him into that crawl, still blindfolded, and had him deliver the baby. She delivered the baby right into his hands. He couldn't see anything. He could only feel it, smell it, you know, hear it, and he couldn't see it. Well, after the baby went into his hands and he carried the baby over to the woman, blindfolded, he fell to the ground in a fetal position and like primaled right there and became a priest. To me, that was a beautiful expression of rehabilitation in the moment, the same day. All of this happened the same day. I mean, he didn't have to serve 20 years in a penal colony. You know what I mean? He didn't have to do all of these things. It just doesn't really create rehabilitation. Of course, it's sad, but instead of losing two people, we lost one person and turned the other one into a priest so that he could help other people. I'm still digesting that, and that happened 15 years ago. And, but I still think about it. I mean, it was deep and intense about what people can do when forgiveness is at the top of the chart and mercy is at the top of the chart and respect and dignity. And so I'm thinking, you know, would that have happened here in the United States with the kinds of systems we've got set up? Probably not.
Not a chance.
Probably not. But this is the direction I really feel that the earth needs to move in. So that, here's another story, I think, a quick story. The Trail of Tears, all right? I knew my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather was a toddler on the Trail of Tears. And so he told me stories about it from 1837, 1838. And one of the stories was when we left here to go out to Oklahoma, people were concerned about what to do with the treasure. Well, when the colonial people, colonizers heard the word treasure, they thought gold. They're still digging up these mountains looking for that gold. But that's not what we meant. When we said treasure, the treasure that we didn't want to leave was all of the songs we had for all of the trees and the flowers and the plants and the animals. All of those songs were sacred songs, and we couldn't take them with us because they're here. They're not in Oklahoma. That's a different place. So that was one of the saddest aspects of departure, was we had to give up all of these songs. So they fretted over what they were going to do with them, because they didn't want them to fall into the hands of the colonizers, because they seemed to be destroying everything they touched. So after some debate, this old grandmother stood up and she said, there's only one place where our treasure will be safe. They said, what's that? She said, we have to get together and come up with the sweetest dream we can think of and put our treasure in that sweet dream. She said, these people live in a nightmare. They'll never have access to them. If some one of these people happens to stumble into our sweet dream, they're welcome to the songs. These songs were made for the people who live in the sweetest dream. And so I remember that to this day. I mean, he told me that when I was 8 years old. But I'm thinking, this is perfect. You know, how do we keep the sweet dream of life on earth alive? How do we keep respect and dignity and generosity and mercy, and most of all, love? How can we keep love alive? You know, I say, well, who do you love? What do you love? People have forgotten. One of the things I've noticed too is whatever we call the truth. You know, it's like truth left town. Truth is gone. Now, people got the word opinion confused with truth. You have an opinion, you think that's the truth. Well, they said, truth left town? I said, yeah, he's gone. They said, where'd he go? I said, he lives up behind my house by Jack's River Falls. And now if you want to find the truth, you got to go deep into the forest and find a waterfall. That's where the truth will be. And so truth hung out there for a while, several years. All of a sudden, here comes beauty walking down the road. Truth forgot all about beauty. But then when he saw it, it all came back to him. And his heart just exploded. He just fell in love with this beautiful woman, entity. Well, she didn't want to have anything to do with it at first, because he'd been in the forest so long, he looked a little tattered, you know. But the truth is persistent. So she finally saw the truth, and she fell in love with the truth. So they got married. So now our people say we don't have to look for the truth anymore. We just look for beauty. And so I could say, don't you think those grandbabies are beautiful? And you'd say, boy, ain't that the truth.
Very nice.
Yeah. These kinds of stories, and the use of these kinds of words and this kind of language is what we're going to have to do to change the outcome. You want to change the future, you really have to change the conversation, because it will lead to our destiny. Whatever we talk about, we've already established our destiny. And I think in the scriptures it said, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Well, I think you could say he who lives by a horrible language will die by a horrible language, because that's what happens. You create your destiny. So it's imperative that we start speaking to people in a kind manner, that we start giving people respect. Everybody wants respect. That we start bringing dignity to the situation. And all these other ones like forgiveness and mercy and reverence, compassion and empathy will follow suit. Because our people said my grandfather told me this one time. He said, we were only given 2 rules. He said, but they weren't sophisticated or complicated enough. And the colonizers had the capacity to mess up a 2-car parade. The first rule was to love the creation with all of your heart. And the second rule was to love all your relatives. So if you love the creation and you loved all your relatives, we've got a shot at thrivability. That will keep the dream alive. And we can enjoy the low-hanging fruit. And we can sing, and we can dance, and we can care for each other. Because originally, we were shepherds and stewards and caregivers. That's when for hundreds of thousands of years, we foraged, we gathered, we hunted, cared for the forest, we cared for each other. Mostly we hear the bad news. The 1,000 years of peace. As soon as you hear the story and it says, okay, and they lived happily ever after, there's no more story. They don't write it down again until somebody hits somebody.
So somebody messes it up, yeah.
And then they start telling the story again.
Yeah.
So for thousands of years, we were happy and at peace, but nobody hears about it. We only hear about the wars and the fighting and the mischief, The language starts to be wrapped around that. So, the English language has lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, plot, scheme, deceive. You can't say those things in indigenous languages. There's no words for them. You want to keep the sweet dream alive, keep the language sweet. You know what I mean? Say good things. That will keep the actions higher as well, because actions and behavior follows the language.
So
I think about that.
So bringing that to our current set of circumstances and the chaos and the crap and the conversation that's going on around the planet, I've noticed that my husky has just arrived.
Outside, walking by,
yeah. The conversation it's purposely polluted, in my opinion. There's been an overt, intentional effort to cause the chaos and the crap that's in the conversation. And at the same time, it seems to be, and I'd like your thoughts on this, it seems to me that it's rather isolated in that the majority of the conversation with all of the nonsense in it, the carefully crafted and curated crap that they've thrown into it, is really, it seems to be kind of limited. In my opinion, it's a smaller group of people that are doing this. They just happen to be the noisiest, the loudest, the most persistent in trying to push the stuff that they've curated to cause the confusion and chaos. But when I go out and I leave my little bunker here and I go and engage with humanity in the little town that I'm in, I don't see all of this as much of the volume and velocity would indicate that would be out there. There seems to be, from my perspective, I think what's happening is we're seeing a paradox of change. We're seeing an old cycle of energy that is diminishing in its substance and its the intensity that it has been on. It's been about 400 years or so when I look at things like astrology and the different cycles within cycles of the energy of the cosmos. And that while that one's diminishing, there's this other one that's emerging. And we're kind of in that cross parable of the diminishing and the new one that's arising. And in that space is a bunch of confusion because of the transformation of energies. When I go out and see that I engage with humanity and the rest of reality outside of my bunker, I hear the chaos that people say is existing, the conflict and the of ideologies and the all of the chaos that people are trying to shove into the conversation, but I don't see it when I go outside. I see it and hear it from the feeds that people are manipulating to shove their information and their version of reality into the news and information that you have access to. But when you dump that and you go out and you just engage with humans, it seems like there's more of at least let me put it this way. It seems to me that this transformative energy that we're going through, this paradox of change, that there's more people that are feeling and engaging with this rise of new energy. They don't know what it is. They're confused because the information they've been given to filter the information has been, it's purposely been manipulated to cause the confusion. But people are starting to feel the rise of this new energy, and they don't know what to do about it. They feel like it's probably a good thing, but they're still feeling the effects of all the crap. So they're having a hard time filtering the good stuff that's about in the energetic cycles of what we're seeing. Does that make any sense to you? Do you see any of that kind of?
Absolutely. I call it the people with the microphone. The people with the microphone are, and I don't care if they're on a news program, if they're politicians, they're all kind of like, they're all choosing horrible words to describe what they want, what they need. I mean, they're using all of the antiquated metaphors and analogies, just like you said. It's like watching a horrible beast fight for its life.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And everybody else is like Song of the South.
Mm.
I mean, when I go over to Europe, for instance, just like you said, the conversations I have with those people are beautiful. Conversations they want to have are beautiful. You turn on the TV, and the news anchors and the politicians are saying all these horrible things. But then when you go out into the general population, everybody wants to be kind to each other. So I'm going to say, just from my experience, about 80% of the world wants exactly what you and I are talking about. The other 20%, I'm going to say about 18% of them are confused because they don't have the power to understand their own thing. They're trying to look for an anchor, a safety valve. And then there's about 4 or 5% that are like demonic.
Mm.
And they seem to be the instigators for these conversations. They just have a lot of resources.
They've got the mic and they've got the volume and velocity turned up on that thing. And,
right.
And it seems like it's more than it is, but it's really a small cadre, a cabal of crappy humans, crappy carbon-based units that are making all the noise. But in reality, I'm glad to hear that you're seeing the same thing I am, because I was starting.
Oh, yeah.
Starting to
I see it everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, there's a few people, and it's almost like I said, it's almost like they're trying to keep this horrible beast alive. They're going to use all the fossil fuels they can until their last drop. They're going to keep just, carrying up our topsoil till it's a problem, and then pointing the blame somewhere else. You know what I mean? That they say, well, it's the supply chain. I said, yes, the supply chain. This world is not infinite. It's finite. We're going to have to start doing the math. You know what I mean? And now, I don't have any dog in this race, but I can tell you from doing some research, for instance, I found that a cow needs an acre of land. The cows together eat 80% of all the vegetables grown in the United States. A cow needs the same amount of water it takes to float a battleship to grow into an adult cow. 300 people could have eaten the food that cow ate, and that cow is only going to feed 30 people. After all of that, I don't think it's a good trade. It's a bad trade. And if we're killing 150,000 cows a week to furnish burgers for these fast food restaurants, and so our people say, well, you know, the reason we don't eat cows is not because of all that. It's because cows represent complacency. And we've had enough of that. I'm up to here with complacency. I'm not going to consume it. I'm not going to consume any more apathy by eating pork. I'm not going to consume any more fear by eating chickens. It's already become part of the language, right?
Yes.
So all of a sudden you start thinking about these things and you say, wait a second, what have I given up? Well, you're giving up. This was a case in point. Okay, I'm in Cuba and I'm talking to these voodoo guys, right? They're doing a ceremony. And so he killed a couple of goats, he killed a couple of chickens in the next room. And I heard the screaming and everything, you know. So he walks in and he's, what do you think about our ceremony? I said, well, I could have done without the blood. I said, I don't like, you know, I said, the screaming and the gnashing of teeth and the pain and suffering. He said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, what? He said, do you see any grocery stores around here? I said, no. He said, you see any butcher shops? I said, no. He said, well, there's 1,000 people in this village. Now, some of them are going to have goat meat. Some of them are going to have chickens for dinner. He said, and we told these chickens and these goats what was going to happen to them. We didn't send them off to a slaughterhouse. We did it. We dealt with it. We took responsibility. They died a good, honorable death. Now, if you're going to eat them, that's the way to kill them. And then you send them off into the next world with some prayers. He said, what do you guys do? You throw 150,000 baby chicks into a wood thrasher. They have no idea what's happening, and you kill them while they're still alive, right? Torture them to death. You do the same thing with cows and pigs and every other animal. You don't go out and hunt them anymore. You don't go on face to face with them and take them out like an honorable death. You know what I mean? It's always somebody else's. And by the time you see that hamburger, it don't look anything like that cow. You know what I mean? So you're not having to think about where it came from, that cow had a mission, that cow had a life, that cow was a sentient being. Okay, now, I'm not a vegetarian, but I see this clearly. There's as behavior and actions and repercussions to actions and karma and all that kind of stuff. I feel it. It's not a good trade. It's not a good trade at all. There's plenty of things that humans can consume that have better energy and better information and are healthier substances than what we're currently eating. Okay, but you know, you juxtapose that with these people with the microphone who are screaming, who've got money in the game. They own these slaughterhouses. They own these prisons that are making money off of the justice system. They own these gas companies like Chevron and Exxon and all these. And they've got millions and billions of dollars. And this is what means something to them. They're not human anymore. They don't care about the topsoil or the babies. They might give a little bit of money to a nonprofit now and then. They might do something over here for Greenpeace. But they do more damage than they do good. And so it is like this beast is fighting for its life, you know. So these half a dozen people who have trillions of dollars between them can fund these operations, trying their best to hang on to something that's so outdated and outmoded, it's not going to be useful anymore. It's going to be gone here pretty soon. And just like you said, we are going through this right now. It's like they call it the apocalypse. It's like the lifting of the veil. Things are becoming transparent. We're starting to see these things now. And hopefully we'll have the compassion and the foresight and the intelligence to go through this shift as beautifully as possible, that it won't take, a revolution, some kind of a hostile situation for this to happen.
I think we're in a transformative disruption of what one of the last shows I did on the previous series of the Nexus was titled The Knowledge Apocalypse. And the subtitle was The End of the Curated Narrative. Because as we've been talking about, the language, the linguistics have been used to get a carefully crafted conversation to drive and the herd and the sleeple has resulted in complete failure. It's fallen apart on its own. It has been, obviously, to me, it's turned into a show of complete incompetence, inept abilities to do things with the kind of integrity and authenticity that we've been talking about. And it's falling apart in front of everybody's eyes. You don't have to be a rocket surgeon to see that stuff is broke. And it's broke from the inside out, meaning it's finally to a place where people are starting to realize that you don't have to be a genius to see that common sense and the proverbial bullshit meters have been pegged into the red. The conversation has been so polluted that it's not hard to see that there's something broke, there's something wrong. And what we're seeing, in my opinion, and I think you were sharing the same thing, there is this transformative disruption. Right now, we're all dancing around the dumpster fire. We're trying to avoid it. We're trying to avoid getting tossed into it, getting consumed by it, and interfering with our existence of trying to have a peaceful, respectful life of integrity and purpose. That knowledge apocalypse, the unveiling of knowledge, I think is what we're in the process of saying, and it's just the beginning of it. So the truth of the teachings that you were talking about earlier, the simple fundamental of existence, of how we interact with ourselves and with the rest of the carbon-based meat sacks that we engage with, that is going back to its source now. People are starting to realize, and I think that oddly enough, one of the things that was a benefit from this latest herding maneuver in this spam plandemic crap that we went through, it caused people, everybody was told, go to your rooms and we'll let you know when it's okay to come out.
Right.
You'll get a treat when you come out if you're good.
Right.
But it caused something that I think has been missing in the conversation, the internal conversation within each one of us, and that is self-reflection, introspection, self-examination. What is it that I think about, and why do I think about it the way I do? And it goes back to what we've been talking about in the language, the linguistics, the words around how we describe ourselves. The conversation that we have with ourselves is where the change is happening and where it's most needed. And I think it's exactly what you're saying. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. We talked about that the other day. We said, wasn't it something that a little bit of fear could shut the whole world down? The fear of death.
From a silent, invisible killer. How masterful was that?
That's what I'm saying.
I give him an A+ on pulling that one out.
Yeah, but look what it did to the earth. I mean, whales were happy, elephants were on the beach, porpoises were swimming in the canals in Italy, the sky was blue, birds were singing, everybody was happy. And I was thinking to myself, people say, well, ordinarily we would never be able to do anything like that. Just shut down the world overnight.
Mm.
And I said, well, fear was able to do it. Would it be something if love could do it? What is, and there are some cultures, as a matter of fact, in the world that take time out every week, every month, every year to honor the environment, to take it easy, to not drive their car, to not turn the things, just to slow everything way down and take it easy on mama for a little while. And I'm thinking, what if the first world countries did that, like Russia and China and the United States? We are the ones who are doing most of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, if we could set the example by saying, look here, we're going to, because if we don't, mother's going to do it because she'll ultimately survive.
Mm-hmm.
It's people who will be discharged. And that's a sad situation because I think it'll be the first time in history that we've ever killed ourselves on the earth with stupidity.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Usually it's an asteroid or some nuclear bomb. It's just not. How did they all die? They got stupid. You know what I mean?
It's ironic that we've got all of this chatter in the social discourse about this artificial intelligence thing, right?
Right.
And I've got a whole rant that I go on from my technology perspective that the two words, and going back to the linguistics again, are the wrong words put together for the wrong reasons, which is essentially just to me an example of the laziness of geeks in the creative and marketing perspective of how to use words. They build really cool stuff sometimes, but they don't know how to package it. They do a shitty job of packaging. So artificial and intelligence don't go together because there is nothing artificial about intelligence, number one. But
kind of like military intelligence,
right? And people are thinking, well, they're hearing all this fear mongering again, using the most powerful emotion of fear, like they did with this whole virus vaccine nonsense.
Mm.
And they're throwing that now at the technology, and we're getting it with the whole disclosure with the UFOs, the ufology, and what I'm calling ufology that's going on in that space. And there's just, again, a bunch of convoluted chaos in the conversation that by using words that aren't either, they haven't vetted the words, they haven't thought through what the hell am I using these words for and why, what am I trying to communicate? So I think of this next generation of tech, which I think is going to be very important in the evolution that we're going to see. Some of the technologies in sound and light for healing, education, just learning and knowledge, I think, are extremely profound, and they're going to be very useful if the people are allowed to develop them in some kind of self-organizing way, where the integrity of the group of people that have the interest and have the intent to learn and to use this new technology, this new knowledge in a positive way to help understand, like you were talking about the metrics or the math that you were doing on, well, when you do the math, this doesn't work out. Well, that's a part of that introspection and rethinking of what the hell it is that we're doing that with the tools that we have, with the knowledge that we have. And why isn't that something that is more prevalent? Why aren't people starting to see the benefits of facts and truth and knowledge? Like you said, truth left the building a long time ago, probably followed Elvis on the way out. But I think we're seeing in this fundamental transformation, as we dance around the dumpster fires, that all of that is required. It's unfortunate, it's messy, but it's needed, because nothing that we are doing from our language through the institutions and the societal organizations and all of that can be fixed. It's all broken. It has to be replaced, not repaired. and that rebuilding from the ground up with a fresh, open, authentic, and transparent. You mentioned transparent and transparency. I think that the transparency is the truth frequency.
Mm-hmm.
The more that you can see for what it is, going again, referencing the first principle thinking and what I refer to as the nut of the nugget. When you get down to that nut of that nugget, which is the transparent authenticity of the integrity of whatever it might be, then the reality of the truth and the love and the relationship can be revealed, and it can be exposed, and it can be expressed. And it's that truth and that honesty that whenever I have conversations with you about this, I get refreshed. I have a sense of being enthusiastic and hope for where we're going. And it's something that I have always appreciated with you. And I think that what you're about to do, going over to Germany and European trip, you're on that mission. That's your purpose, to go make sure that truth, that integrity, that authenticity, through being the person that you are, is going to go over there and make a difference.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the main focuses that we take with us is the significance and how critical it is to have ceremonies and rituals and rites of passage in our culture. Because one of the realizations that people sometimes forget, if they even think about it, is that honoring our ancestors. Like I said, you and I are testimonials to a successful lineage of ancestors who avoided the genocide. And you and I, and everyone else here, are the ancestors of the future. So it's kind of like a link in a chain. Now, we are going to be here just for a little while, but we're going to be ancestors for the rest of eternity. So I'm thinking, you better like it. You better be good at it, because you're going to do it for the rest of time. So I'm thinking that's why I believe the people that I have been taught by say that's who we are. We're ancestors in training. That's why we learn all these beautiful, elegant, elaborate kinds of characteristics. Love is the healer. Forgiveness is the medicine. Reverence, respect, dignity, mercy, all these things, because once that we become part of the cosmos again, that's going to be our profile. If it's not, then we're going to be part of the profile of all of the horrible things that happen. Black holes, place that can't be, identified with a sweet dream, And so and I've seen, in my experience, I've seen three things that measure people up in that way. One of them, unfortunately, is a close call with death. Can have a significant effect on what we've been talking about, how people think about themselves and how they fit into the picture. Once they think they're just about to die, but they don't, it could change everything. Their value-based decision-making skills take a lot. The other one is plant medicine. I have seen people make a beautiful shift with ayahuasca and peyote and psilocybin and ibogaine and various other plant medicines. The problem that I see is that it can become habit-forming, not because of the substance, but because of people's habits. You find something beautiful, you run it in the ground.
You sometimes too much of a good thing is not a good thing.
It's like a glass of water is a beautiful thing, but too much and you drown.
That's right.
And but my favorite one is the one we're talking about, where people just take the initiative, put the pieces together, come up with the idea that love is the main thing, and then stay there. Like old Rumi said, they fall in love, stay there.
Mm-hmm.
Then your decisions will be made from a place of love, and it'll all be sweet. A child-friendly world, where people can be, safe. That's what we want. Make the children feel safe, because until you feel vulnerable, healing is pretty far away. You've got to be able to be vulnerable to heal. And so, like I say, over in Europe, this next trip is going to be a diligent attempt to alter the narrative. And so what we do is we have people, we call it a Indaba. Indaba is a sacred conversation about things that really matter. And so when people are heard, beautiful things happen. When people get to say things out loud, and they get seen and they get heard, they can shift, they can alter. But that's respect, see, and that's dignity.
Mm.
A lot of people, when they don't feel heard and they don't feel like they're being respected, I mean, wars can break out from too much disrespect. So it's a beautiful thing. And I think if we really were thinking about the topsoil, about our water, about our children, I don't see how anybody any sane human being could take that information and turn it on us, turn it around. It would have to be that way. Somehow or another, we have to have these sacred conversations. That's why ceremony is so important. Put people in touch with their ancestors. Put them in touch with the fact that you're going to be an ancestor one day. You would think, again, the fact that we all came through a mother, that we all need water, that we're all going to die, that'd be enough motivation to have us all understand we're all on the same ride. And what we need to do is take care of this place and take care of each other. I mean, somehow or another, greed, the money, the hoarding, all those kinds of things, the agriculture came into the picture, and then people started thinking, this is mine, that's yours. But once upon a time, we didn't have those pronouns. We only had us, we, and our. I remember as a little boy, my fellow walked into my grandfather's little hut, and they were talking about something. This man said, Charlie, I know me and you know what's going on, but what about all these others? My grandfather said, there are no others on earth. It's just us. You know what I mean? So if you have the heart to include all people as your family, these are my people. Well, anthropology does that. We just don't buy it. If you look in anthropology, it'll call us the family of man. The family of man. We are a species. And you would think that we would take that to heart and want everybody to be like a sentient being. We would care about people's babies. We'd care about the fact that they were eating. In the villages where I grew up, the most wealthiest person, or the one that was considered the most wealthy, was the one who gave everything away. And the one who had the most power was the one who least wanted it. And so if you find somebody who is humble, who has humility, who's strong, who is dedicated, who has integrity, never lies about anything, who has everybody's best interest at heart, those kind of people don't want to be leaders, but they make the best leaders.
Mm.
And so it comes down to a bumper sticker that says you want to pick people and to be powerful that love people more than power. No, I think it was Jimi Hendrix that said,
When the love of power is exceeded by the power of love, then there will be peace.
Amen. That's what I'm talking about. So people know this, people see this, but it's the actualization of doing it. What we're contending is that if you want to actually do it, you have to have your conversation be guided by that so that that can happen. It won't happen if we don't talk about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? We have
Right.
to talk about it. We have to sing about it. We have to dance about it. That's why ceremonies and rituals and rites of passage are so critical. And a lot of people don't even do them anymore. So, but the more ceremonies you do, you can understand the sacredness and the preciousness of life. Foremost, of, grandbabies, great grandbabies, not just two-leggeds, all the animals, people are getting on the bandwagon that all animals are sentient beings. There are countries now that are declaring constitutions for other living creatures besides humans, that have, a seat at the table. They have a voice, which didn't happen for a while. And in the United States, the random conversations you're privy to in this country are ridiculous. You know what I mean? When you think about it, it's like Mad Magazine. Remember that magazine?
Oh yeah, and I was talking to somebody yesterday. We were musing on about all of the stuff that's going on in the intelligence realms and the agencies and the different intelligence groups around the world, and we likened it to that old cartoon of Spy versus Spy, right? It's like they're all out there trying to out intel and out spy the other, and they're causing enough of the chaos itself. But one of the things that you mentioned earlier that made me think about this transformative change that we're seeing, and how, from my perspective, I think there's more integrity and authenticity through transparency that's happening in the global populace of humans. And I saw about a year and a half ago, I started calling it, I think what we're going to see is the rise of the pissed off peeps. In other words, people are going to start seeing the truth. The knowledge apocalypse is the unveiling of all of the lies and the crap and the nonsense that's been built up and packed on and shoved in and up all of this conversation and people. And they're starting to see that the majority of it, if not all of it, is complete bullshit. And they're getting pissed off about it. And one of the things that we're seeing as a symptom or an example of that is what's going on with these farmers, going back to the whole, how do we work with a sustainable, resource-laden Gaia mother that provides all of our sustenance and all of the resources we need. Well, now you've got these farmers in all these countries that have just said, we've had enough of you politicians, bureaucrats, and administrative idiots, and now we're going to bring all of the manure that we need and that we create by doing farming, and we're going to pile it up around your place. And we're going to watch you crawl through the crap on your own. So I think there's a rise of the pissed off peeps afoot. People have had enough. They're starting to more and more every day see the lies, and they're seeing through the lies and the bullshit. And they're going, that's it. We've had enough of you guys. We've listened to you. Your credibility is tanked because of the way you've clearly tried to engineer and control people, and it's broken. None of it works anymore. They try to pull it, in my opinion, if they try to pull another pandemic, people are going to go, sorry, you guys blew the last one. We're not going to believe you this time. So I think the self-organizing collective of the individual self-examining conscious humans is what we're seeing that transformation of. And I think it starts with a clarity and a refinement of the conversation, the importance of that transparency in the conversation, and it being as real and as honest and as truthful as it can and needs to be. And I think that's exactly what you're doing, what you're talking about. And I got to tell you, Tom. Every time, as I said, I have a conversation with you about this, it fills me with hope, gives me more clarity and energy, and just Godspeed to what you're doing and the way that you're doing it, because I think you are at that nut. You are the nut of the nugget in this.
I am
this in this transformation time that we're in.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate being able to spend time with you and have this conversation, the kind of authentic conversation with integrity that needs to happen. And I applaud you and honor you for that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for saying so. I appreciate it. Yeah. We're the same thing. It's like we are both in our own way holding up the stream, of a precious life for generations to come. Once upon a time, it was so simple. If it lasted 7 generations, do it. If it don't last 7 generations, don't do it. You know what I mean? And it was pretty simple. If it's going to hurt anybody, don't do it. You know what I mean? If it's not going to hurt anybody, go ahead and do it. That kind of thing.
Right.
But anymore, money has entered the picture, and wealth, or the ideology of wealth, and whatever else. And so we have to break through that. You're right, and so I'm excited about that too. I have hope. I think the Creator is in charge, and I think that's why they call it the Great Mystery, because there really are no answers. There's just this. That's why I think no matter what anybody says or how anybody goes, the best place for all concerned is in kindness, mindful kindness. Like Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it. We've got to do that if we want the future to be here for our grandbabies and our great-grandbabies and so forth and so on. I went into a ceremony not long ago, and I could envision in my cellular memory one of my forefathers dodging dinosaur feet to get a drink of water. Apologetic for these people, I try to be understanding, and I think, well, I know how it is, but you really don't need all these things, and you don't realize what harm they're causing. I mean, when you really get into the nuts and bolts of what it takes to create the supply chain we all depend on, and you look at all these cities where 90% of the people are living on 10% of the land, none of these cities have any resources. We have to feed them. They're like on life support. We send in the food. We have to go in and clean up the mess. We have to take the garbage out for millions and millions of people. And so the only ones that seem to have any hope are the ones living in the woods, who know how to get their own food, who are off the grid. You know what I mean? And they're taking care of it. They're taking care of the land. They're taking care of the land. Land's taking care of them. But pretty soon, that's going to have to be the inevitable outcome of this incredible time we're going through.
And there's 2 things that I'd like to add to that. One, 100 years ago, we were all preppers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the fact that it's come back around is I think kind of an interesting perspective. But I think the fundamental thing that we've been talking about specifically in various aspects of it is the understanding of value. What is that word and how is it used? The mutual exchange of something that people, and just looking at, for example, just the conversation here with you and me, what is the value definitions that we're using to have this conversation? The value of respect, the value of the integrity, being authentic, being real, talking about the actual nuts in the nuggets, right? And I think that a return to what is fundamental and how people define value is really one of the core things that everything is getting filtered through, that is a part of this transformation. People hold on to things like you were talking about wealth, right? Well, that's a definition or a perspective of value that certain people have said, well, that's where my value is. My value metrics and how I measure all of that stuff is based around this thing called currency and coinage and whatever it might be, and as much of the biggest piles as you can get. But at the end of the day, the real value is the one-to-one conversation and relationship, the exchange of value between yourself and those that you are exchanging conversation with. And I think that value, that's the authenticity, that's the transparency being the truth frequency, is what is that value that you're exchanging. And again, the value that I have and that I share with you in these conversations is second to none. It's the kind of stuff
I agree.
It gives me and my heart that wonderful feeling of, oh man, was that really some good value exchange? I enjoyed that very much. I want some more.
That's right. Well, we're living examples of children that play well together with other children.
That's right. And you have to be able to know that you can get out on the playground and you can share.
Yep. That's right.
And,
and the more integrity you have, the more integrity we develop. Yep. Honesty is and mercy and reverence and respect and dignity and all these things are critical right now, because we're at that time. It's kind of like the Titanic, when it was like this, and everybody was running around on deck trying to move the deck furniture around.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the bar, argued over their bar tab. All the indigenous people were down below. They saw the problem, and then you had to fix it, but nobody wanted to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And all the people who were promised that the boat wouldn't sink were running around the decks saying it ain't happening. Don't, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes, right?
That's right.
And the boat sunk. And that's kind of where we are right now. Our supply chain is tilted. We can actually see the damage in the side of the hull. We know the inevitable outcome, but hopefully we'll be able to repair this and continue on our journey before it actually takes its toll. And I think that's what's happening. And I think that there is hope. I think there is somewhere deep inside of us, even if we can't articulate it, a longing, for family, a longing for someone to care, a longing to care for someone. It's deep, and so we have to uncover it. That's what ceremonies and rituals do. They uncover that and make people feel okay. But people get hurt, people say things and do things, and then they go into shells. And we got psychiatrists, all over the place. When people say, well, it's the language. When you can do things like manipulate and deceive and plot and scheme and lie and cheat and steal. But if you have a language where those words don't exist, then you don't go there. It seems like we've created a language perfectly suited for psychotherapy.
It's become mental parasites in a mental prison.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
Well, I know that we're going to follow up with this conversation after your return trip from Europe. I got to tell you, you have serious steel cojones taking this flight on the eclipse next Monday.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be 30,000 feet. During the solar eclipse. That's going to be weird.
That I would not want to do that, but I don't think that we're going to. It's interesting. Again, we're talking about the language and all of the hype around that event, which is a celestial astronomical event, astrological event. We've got the whole Mercury in retrograde thing, and we've got a whole bunch of really interesting alignments that haven't happened in apparently centuries. But your trip, you're going over to Germany, you're going to do ceremony, you do some education. I think you're doing some interviews over there as well, right?
Well, yeah, right now I just got the itinerary last night. I do. I'm going to do 2 television interviews. I'm going to participate in a documentary about the Black Forest called "Caring for the Forest." I'll do 3 lodges, and then 2 kind of, they call them lecture series, but for me, just like this, I don't treat it like a lecture. I treat it like a conversation. It's just a conversation with a couple of hundred people. And so, but it's still a conversation. Everybody who has something to say can by all means say it. And it's going to be at place called the Bielefeld University in Bielefeld, Germany. It's kind of like an MIT. It's a robotic engineering college. And so that's going to be interesting for me because the conversation is around ethics and morals and value-based decision-making skills and how they might apply to artificial intelligence and robotic engineering. I mean, I don't know what to think about all this. I just think that any way that we can express the criticalness of being kind and mindful and respectful for each other is a good thing.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, if we don't do this, I mean, stupid people is bad enough. Stupid robots is it's going to be even worse.
I agree with that, but as you were describing that, I was imagining a Tom Blue Wolf robot, so that they had cloned you, and this robot is just speaking about this ancient wisdom and the authenticity of. And I'm thinking that would take the whole robotic field and turn it on its head. So I think I'm wishing you all the best in that, and really interested in how that turns out. So in closing here, I know that when you get back, we're going to do a follow-up to your trip, talk more about this conversation that we're having now, that between you and I, and then how that conversation we see unfolding, and particularly after your trip and the lectures. And I'm really interested to hear what happens when you get in there.
Me too.
Start injecting some of Tom Blue Wolf into a robot. It might just go on tilt,
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking the robot would move up into Quebec, find a cabin somewhere in the wilderness, and retire.
Oh, that's
robots off the grid.
I think that there's a lot of really interesting potential on this whole AI, machine learning, EIO stuff, and it's just going to be a matter of how the collective, the self-organizing collective, it gets engaged in it and is involved in it, so that it has more of the authenticity of real people being involved in its development, its deployment, its use, and all of that. Because it can certainly be, as we've already seen, it's all about the programming. It's all about who programs it. It's all about the language that they use in the program and what they tell it can do and it can't do. And we're seeing all these tech guys having all kinds of catastrophic events, rolling out their pre-programmed, woke, narrowly minded, ideological programming, and it just dumps out more of the same crap. And people are going, "Oh, I'm afraid it's going to take my job." I said, "Well, did you see what it just did? It can't even do its own job." So you might need to just back off the concern and the worry a little bit. I don't think it's going to be the apocalyptic or catastrophic rollout that people are fearful of. But, like we were saying, they're using fear-based linguistics and language to control the way that people see it and think about it. But in reality, I think the technology is going to be very profound, and it's going to be to the benefit. We're going to figure out not only how to use, the natural resources of Gaia and our Mother Earth here, and the solar system and the cosmos, the ether, everything that we inhabit. We're in space. Space is required for us to be in the place that space is in. And we don't, having an understanding and awareness of how open and actually everything that we need, water, air, communication, energy, is in the space and the air that we breathe. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist in the forms that we know it as. And I think that reality is what people are really going to start having an awareness of and an awakening to. So just like being able to understand a more mathematical and logical and common sense way of utilizing the resources that we need in order to inhabit the reality that we're in, we're going to see that same thing happen on the technology side. I think people are going to see it and go, well, we can use this in a really beneficial way. Sound and light medicine and healing, I think, is going to be one of the most profound things that we're going to see. The plant medicines that you mentioned are already starting to make an impact on the way in which health and wellness is actually viewed, because the allopathic model doesn't take into account all of the way that the biology naturally functions.
Right.
So we're seeing that transformation. But all these things give me hope, just like this conversation I'm having with you, my friend.
My grandmother used to say, time was created so everything wouldn't all happen at once. And space was created so it wouldn't all happen to you.
I love it.
Yeah. That's right.
Well, Tom, it's been the usual honor and privilege and pleasure to.
Oh, likewise, my friend. Likewise. I enjoy your company, and we have awesome conversations. It always makes me feel thoughtful and, again, hopeful and encouraged and excited about moving into what we call the future.
It makes me feel good about, like you said, continuing our ancestors in training.
Yes, that's right. We are the ancestors of the future. So we want to be good ones, right?
Yes. Well, thanks again, my brother, and I look forward to having the follow-up conversation after your trip. And
Me too.
I'm sure that's going to be just as exciting and very, very interesting. So thank you.
Post eclipse.
Yes.
Enjoy, my friend.
Take care, brother. Talk to you soon. Have a safe trip.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Nextcast. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. And please like, share, and subscribe.